This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
PurdyInsurance.com. Auto and light business, boat, motorcycle, RV. Multiple insurance needs. They organize, handle them all, make sure you're fully insured, and they do everything they can to save you money. Customer service means everything to them. At Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury, go to PurdyInsurance.com. By the way, Todd, you don't have to write down the 888 number on gambling problem. Okay, the suit has it on speed dial. So don't worry about it. Okay, just figure it out. Yeah, just thought I'd mention that to you. That way you weren't wasting time. Everybody knows how much I love baseball. Well, I love talking baseball with Scott Lauber. Scott, welcome. It is an absolute pleasure as always. Thanks so much for your time.
Sure, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. It doesn't feel like baseball weather, but it's fun to talk baseball. So 3 guys get in, Ichiro, CC Sabathia, and Billy Wagner. How many did you end up voting for? Because I believe you get a max of 10, if I recall.
That's right. Yeah. So I had 7 check marks on my ballot this year. I had the 3 players who got in addition to Carlos Beltran, Chase Utley, Felix Hernandez, and I added Andy Pettit this year. So that was my group. I did have some spaces available, and I thought long and hard as usual about Jimmy Rollins. I gave David Wright a lot of thought this year, Dustin Pedroia as well, and those will all. I'm happy to say those guys will all be on the ballot again next year. So I'll get a good chance to go back over them again. But that's kind of where I was, where I landed. So it's interesting. It's a good group. I thought it was a really good ballot this year. There were a lot of really, really good candidates, and I thought more about this year's ballot, I think, than probably almost any other, and I've been voting for 10 years. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to keep thinking about as their candidacies continue.
Were you disappointed in all? I mean, you vote the way you vote, but I think Chase Utley only got like 36, 37%. So he's got ways to go to build up that number. Disappointed you get a little more support based on what you know about him?
Maybe a little bit. I think he got an 11-point bounce this year, which was the 3rd largest that I could see. Pettit got a nice bounce, as I kind of expected he would. I kind of call that the Sabathia effect. I think a lot of voters were like me. They looked at CC Sabathia and thought, well, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And then they looked at Andy Pettit's numbers and were sort of struck by how similar they were. I wanted to be careful because I don't think Andy Pettit had the career that Sabathia had. It's one thing to look at the numbers and to say, well, boy, the wins were similar and the ERA was similar and all of that. But, if you watched, and this is where I think we have to be careful sometimes that we don't dive too deep. You want to do a deep dive, obviously, into the numbers and the careers, but that we don't get too sort of blinded by the numbers, because anybody who watched their careers, there was something different about when CC Sabathia pitched. He was an ace in every sense of the word. There was a reason why he started, something like 11 opening days. They were teammates together, Pettit and Sabathia, in New York for 4 years, and I actually went back and looked every single time that they were both available, either to start an opening day or to start game 1 of a playoff series. The Yankees started Sabathia. So look, I mean, the sport told us over and over again that Sabathia was an ace of aces, right? But I thought Pettit's numbers were stood up really strong to Sabathia's. I thought Pettit's postseason kind of put him over the edge for me. I think a lot of voters felt the same way. So he got a nice bounce, and I think there was one other, the name escapes me now. There was one other player, maybe I think it might have been Carlos Beltran, who got a higher bounce than Utley, but 11 points from the first year to the second year. I think he's still in good shape. He's right at that 40% mark, basically. And I think with no real strong first ballot candidates the next 2 years, he could make some more gains and kind of be in a position maybe in 27 or 28 to kind of climb over that 75% mark.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the postseason part. It's one thing. What kind of role, because not everybody, Ernie Banks never played a postseason game, different time, different set of circumstances. But what role can postseason play in your mind in swinging you one way or the other?
Yeah, I kind of look at it. I do look at it. I do think it's important. But I also don't think it's, maybe it's sort of a separator in some ways. I always gave Curt Schilling a lot of credit for his postseasons.
Sure.
I was a Schilling voter for many years. It kind of nudged me over the top with Pettit this year. I guess it can also be a little bit of a detractor. It did not affect me with Billy Wagner, whose postseason numbers were not good in his career. And also, I do look at players who had successful postseason track records. But I voted for Felix Hernandez this year. He never got to the postseason, and it wasn't his fault because for 10 years he was as good as it gets as aces go in the American League. There just weren't real good teams around him in Seattle. So I do think it can be a little bit of a separator, and maybe it nudges you one way or the other. But I don't look at it necessarily as a disqualifier or a or just hey, this guy was great in the postseason, let's put him in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because I think Schilling was 11-2 in the postseason. I mean, the bigger the moment, the better he seemed to pitch. And we're talking baseball here. I'm not talking about what you think about what he thinks.
Right, exactly.
How much do you have to separate that? Because you have to deal with a lot of players, talk to them firsthand. They aren't all angels, and some of them rub you the wrong way. Even if they rub you the wrong way, how important is it for you to objectively put one against the other, even if a guy rubs you the wrong way?
I think it's really important. Look, I'll take it from the other side. David Wright, I covered David Wright in the minor leagues in 2004 in Binghamton, New York. I was the baseball writer there for a small newspaper. He was in Double-A, and he was like 21 years old. And to this day, he's one of my favorite players that I've ever covered. And I wouldn't say we're in touch regularly or anything, but we've stayed in touch over the years. It's the same way as it was then. And I grapple with his candidacy because, I think he had a really, really high peak. I think it was maybe a little short because of injuries. I think it was probably a year or two short for me. And I really go back and forth, and I try to block out how I feel about David Wright as a human being.
Right.
When I look at his credentials. It's hard to do. It's hard to do because you feel a certain fondness for someone, or you've got a relationship with someone, but you do have to kind of put that aside. And I think it works both ways. Obviously, the only time that I've ever honestly held anything against anyone and it has nothing to do with a relationship or with how I was treated by a certain person. I don't vote for Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez and players of their ilk because, for me, if you fail the drug test after MLB instituted testing in 2004, to me that's disqualifying. That's the only sort of character thing that I've ever really utilized because I think, look, if you did it after MLB said you can't do it anymore, you knew what you were doing and you flouted the rules. So to me, that's that's a strike against you. But other than that, I've tried to sort of, if you're asking about personal feelings for someone, you try to do your best to kind of put that aside.
Yeah, if anybody, and we know David Ortiz was on that list, that was on that list that was covertly over whatever released to the New York Times, that doesn't bother you at all. It's when they actually put the policy in, right?
Yeah, I think the line of demarcation, right, is 2004, I guess, was the first year that players were tested and suspended if they tested positive. So, we can talk about David Ortiz a lot. I covered him for a good many years in Boston, and talked a lot about that New York Times report and other, steroid-related things with him, and came to the conclusion that look, who knows what anybody does, right? But he didn't fail a test after 2004. So for me, he was a check mark.
Yeah, let me put it this way. I don't think people realize how often he got tested after 2004.
Right.
Like a lot. And that's what people don't realize. And he passed all of them. Okay? That's something that's one of those underreported things, because they'll talk about 2003, it justifiably so, but you were around him. It's like it was a constant, come on, David, let's go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was all the time. When do you start looking to next year's ballot? Do you start looking at possibilities who's on next year's ballot? Do you start doing that now, or do you like to take a deep breath?
Yeah, it's funny. I do take a peek. For people who don't know, the ballot arrives at your door and right around Thanksgiving, and it's due back in the mail. You actually have to mail it by New Year's Eve. So you've got about a month or so to spend with it, and I kind of really dig in December and, the middle of December or so, and I do take a peek, because one of my personal rules is that once I vote for someone, I want to continue to vote for them. I don't want to have to. You can vote for a maximum of 10. I don't want to have to take away a vote because I run out of space. So I do look, I do peek, and I do sort of think a little bit about my votes now and how it may influence how I vote for someone who's coming up. So, the name that really kind of popped for me when I looked ahead to next year was Cole Hamels. He'll most likely be on the ballot for the first time, and I mentioned Andy Pettitte and how Sabathia coming on the ballot this year kind of made me look a little bit differently at Andy Pettitte, and he was the last name I checked, and as I was going to the mailbox, I thought, well, now I'm going to have a tough decision to make with Cole Hamels, right? So for better or worse, it's going to make me look even harder at Hamels to sort of see, like, how does he stack up to Pettitte, right? And guys of that nature. So, yeah, I look at it. And now, now that the voting's done, and, I probably won't think a whole lot about it until the ballot arrives in November. But, yeah, it's there. It's in the back of your mind. You're like, well, this guy's coming on, and I'm going to have to, dig in a little bit on him and make a decision. And again, I want to be sure. So, like, I don't, one of the things I hate about this process is that people think when you don't vote for someone that you're voting against them.
I know.
I don't see it that way. Like, I haven't voted for Jimmy Rollins, but it doesn't mean I won't, and B, it's not a knock on Jimmy Rollins. I tend to think of it as the people you vote for, you're elevating them. If they're on the ballot, and one thing I think we don't celebrate enough is what it means to just be on it. If you're on the ballot, it probably means you're in the top 3 to 4% of players who played of all time. And what the Hall of Fame is asking the voters to do is sort of take that group and whittle it down to 1 to 1.5%. And so you're not denigrating someone by not voting for them. They're already great. You're just elevating the people you do vote for. And I want to be pretty sure when I vote for someone that I'm not going to, a year later, I'm not going to look back and go, why did I vote for that guy? Or oh no, I'm going to run out of space and I'm going to have to drop someone. So I think you want to give it a lot of thought, and I think most voters feel this way. And you want to make sure that you feel good about as good as you can for a pretty subjective exercise that you feel pretty good about, at least about your process.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I was talking with my broadcasting class this morning, and I said, I don't want you guys to ever sit there and say X player stinks. I said, and here's the reason why. There are 8 billion people in the world. 156 have their tour card. I said, he doesn't stink. He's just not as good as Tiger Woods. Well, Jimmy Rollins, great player. Very few people in the history of the world have been able to do what he's done. But now you're whittling it down to, is he one of those 2 to 3 guys, or in your case, I think you voted for 7 out of 8 billion people in the world that you think can make, at this hour, the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's about what it is. It's not you knocking somebody else. It's just you feel like at this hour you have better choices.
Yeah, I mean, hundreds of thousands, right? First of all, you think about how good you have to be to play Major League Baseball. And
that's
then,
right.
And then, you take that group and how great you have to be on the Hall of Fame ballot, right? There were 28 names on the Hall of Fame ballot this year. And then, how elite of elite you have to be to get a check mark on that ballot. So that's why I say I think we don't make a big enough deal when the ballot comes out about who's on it and how great those guys were. And even the ones who fall off after 1 year, you made the Hall of Fame ballot, and that's extraordinary. So, again, you get into these arguments, and I'm also quite careful, or I try to be, at least when I write about players' candidacies, and to make sure that look, it's not when I say that so and so's OPS plus or their hit total or whatever was lower than so and so's, it's not, you're not knocking the guy who's like the lesser of those two. You're saying this guy's greater than so it's hard. It's hard to do without making it sound like you're being critical of someone. I know Billy Wagner pretty well, or a little bit, and heard some of his comments yesterday, and he was talking about how excruciating it was to be on the ballot for 10 years and to consistently miss and fall short. And I have no doubt in my mind that it was excruciating for him to go through that for 10 years. But I also think that if you're, it's probably easier said than done. If you're taking it personal that, you come in at 40% instead of 75%, well, what are we arguing over here? Whether you were, the top 2% of players who ever played or the top 1.5%. We're really the difference is so minuscule that, to be on the Hall of Fame ballot for 10 years, even if he had fallen short, would have been nothing for him to be disappointed by.
That's why I've always laughed, because there's a friend of mine who's so mad that Derek Jeter wasn't unanimous because Dan Shaughnessy didn't vote for him. I said, once you clear 75%, who cares? It's like that. You're in. So I do have to ask you about the guy that also fell one vote shy of being unanimous, and that's Ichiro. When you watched Ichiro, what was it about him, or the multitude of things about him, where you said, man, that is a Hall of Fame player I'm watching it right now?
Yeah, you know it when you see it, right? And there was nothing he did that was that you could really nitpick, right? He was bat-to-ball skills, contact skills, ability to find holes on the field. He could run, he could throw. I thought about this when Ricky Henderson passed away last month, what it was like in the, I'm in my late 40s. I grew up watching Ricky Henderson play. What it was like when he got on first base, right? And how, suddenly you were watching first base. You weren't watching the hitter because you were wondering when he was going to take off and go. And for all those hits that Ichiro had, how many times you saw him, slap a single through the middle, and then before you knew it, he was standing on third base. If you think about what he did, I actually looked back at it again the other day. The first season he came over from Japan, 27 years old, won the batting title, won the Rookie of the Year, and won the MVP on a team that won 116 games.
Right.
How extraordinary is that? Most hits in a single season, So, I mean, greatest of the great players, and kind of a, even for when he played, certainly if he was playing now, you'd call him kind of a throwback because, he didn't, it wasn't like all about power, and it wasn't all about, hitting the ball out of the ballpark, but it was getting on base. It was making things happen. It was doing everything well. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of Ichiro. I mean, he did everything well. And, you talk to people around the game, people he played with, and they say, like, if Ichiro wanted to hit 30 home runs, he could have hit 30 home runs.
That's right.
But that wasn't the kind of player he was, and it wasn't how he could best help his team. So, tremendous player, and look, I mean, people are going to get all wrapped up in the fact that somebody didn't vote for him, and as a journalist, I do love transparency, right? I think we ask for transparency from the people we cover, and we can provide it, when we do something like vote for a Hall of Fame. But hey, look, ultimately people do what they want to do with their ballots, and while I would love to know why one person didn't vote for him, you can't get hung up on that either. I mean, good luck getting 400 people in a room to agree on anything like that. It's January 22nd. I mean, 400 people can't agree on the day of the week. So, I'm not surprised it wasn't unanimous. A little disappointing, but at the end of the day, it doesn't diminish his greatness or the fact that it was just 99.7% is overwhelming.
I think he's in. Because it's interesting you talk about the home run thing. I'd watch Wade Boggs in batting practice. He could hit a home run anytime he wanted, but that's not how he played. Hey, Scott, absolute pleasure. Always love talking baseball. I don't care what the temperature is out. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve. Anytime.
Scott Lauber, outstanding, Philadelphia Inquirer. This half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummels Wharf, online at sunburymotors.com. And this half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury, go to purdyinsurance.com.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf.
An in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Half hour brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews. The best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, lots and lots of snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies. Ready-to-drink cocktails. Yes, High Noon, Crown Royal, Jack Daniels. And the pickle bar led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. The Derek Jeter thing I always laugh about. Because Matt's the one that gets all wound up about the fact that Dan Shaughnessy didn't vote for him. Who cares? They are As long as you know how hard it is to get to the 75%? I mean, ask Billy Wagner. It took him 10 years. And don't tell me Billy Wagner. Hey, look at all the guys that didn't get. Okay, there's only one guy that's been unanimous. That's Mariano Rivera. Now, is Mariano Rivera the greatest Hall of Famer of all time? Okay, if you gave me a choice between Mariano Rivera and Hank Aaron, gee, which guy do you think I'd pick? Come on. I mean, really.
Mariano Rivera because of your deep Yankee fandom.
I don't think so. Not even close. Not even, or not in the same realm. I got Willie Mays and Derek Jeter. Which guy do I pick? Oh, I don't know. Right? But it doesn't matter whether you're unanimous. It's nice, but it's irrelevant. Billy Wagner will tell you how important it is to get to 75%. Okay? That's all, right? He'll tell you how important. It took him 10 years. Well, Billy Wagner wasn't Derek Jeter. Oh, for goodness sakes. Guess what? They're in the same club. You know? You know. People, I was talking to my broadcasting class about this today. And I said, it's interesting in sports. I said, we argue about so many trivial things. Like trivial things. Like, what's the bottom line? Did he get into the Hall of Fame? Yes. But he wasn't unanimous. Who cares? I don't care. Right? Did you get in? Look at all the guys that didn't make it in. Yeah. I think, the suit wants to be in the Snyder County Hall of Fame. It's just, we're doing everything we can to invent accomplishments. What? I was just trying to help.
Maybe we'll buy one of the small Snyder County towns for him and name it after him.
Oh, that'd be great. That's a beautiful idea. Yeah.
There's a ton of them.
Because the stuff I sent in last year, I had them winning the Chicago Marathon. I mean, it was like a lot of things, and they kept looking at the picture, and it just didn't match up. I don't think so.
One of District 4's top soccer officials.
Well, that isn't going to happen. That is not happening. It's hard to get into any Hall of Fame. Any Hall of Fame. I don't care whether it's your county Hall of Fame, your town Hall of Fame, your state Hall of Fame, all right? Or your sports Hall of Fame. It's just hard.
There's only one of us here that's in any Hall of Fames. This is all you.
Well, yeah.
I knew you'd love that. Yeah,
that's not what I was talking about. But it's just hard to get into any, to be recognized like that. And then you got Matt all upset that Derek Jeter wasn't unanimous. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. And so Ichiro absolutely deserved it. CC Sabathia, it was regular season, postseason. He was just an ace of aces. Billy Wagner, all those games he saved. I know the postseason wasn't that great for him, but all those games that he saved in his career, right? There are a couple that just misses. That has to be so hard. I mean, Billy Wagner cried when he found out about being in the Hall of Fame. That's how hard it is to get 75% of the people to back you. It's just, okay? And that's hard. And I don't think that's appreciated, the difficulty of it. I mean, because go back to Derek Jeter. Is Derek Jeter the greatest Yankee player of all time? Is Mariano Rivera the only unanimous Hall? Is he the greatest Yankee player of all time? Let's see. Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle. Again, we're kind of running through a few names here. Right? They're not even the best player on their own franchise. But the timing was right for Mariano Rivera. He was unanimous, and Derek Jeter missed by one vote because the timing was right. The voting group, the voting block changed. I can tell you right now, I can absolutely assure you in no uncertain terms that in the 1970s, 80s, there was no way Mariano Rivera would be a unanimous Hall of Famer. You want to know why?
I was going to say, Ichiro wouldn't be in this year either. There was a lot of guys that wouldn't vote for guys that were first-year Hall of Famer, first-year on the ballot.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of people, especially in the New York block, that said that nobody should be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, why wasn't Hank Aaron unanimous? Why wasn't Willie Mays unanimous? I mean, why wasn't Tom Seaver unanimous? I mean, none of them. Right? Ted Williams wasn't unanimous. Joe DiMaggio wasn't unanimous. Right? It's just hard. Right? That's why I laugh when I hear, like, when Matt complains about Derek Jeter, like, hey, guess what? There are better players than him, in my opinion, that weren't unanimous. And believe me, I think Derek Jeter is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Derek Jeter is absolutely a first ballot Hall of Famer. But is he the greatest Yankee? Nope. Right? Is he the greatest player? Nope. He doesn't have to be. He's one of the greatest of all time. One of the pool of the greatest players of all time. That's all that matters. How the vote turns out, as long as you clear 75%, it's all gravy after 75%. It's all gravy. It's all gravy. Right? That's why I tried to convince Matt of that. He's like, just was so upset. Like, what are you upset about? He made it. He should have been unanimous. Oh, you want the list of guys I think that should have been unanimous? Come on. Stan Musial? Probably should have been unanimous, don't you think? Mike Schmidt? He should have been unanimous.
Speaking of Mike Schmidt, did you get a chance to see the MLB Network thing on him?
I did not.
I had to forget. He's still really hurt with how he was treated by the Phillies fans, even all these years later. I mean, I get it, but
yeah, you know what? Because when Mike came up, Mike was what, a 175 hitter?
Yes.
Somewhere in that neighborhood? And struggled. And I mean, why do you think Ted Williams never tipped his cap in Boston? Until finally the 1999 All-Star game he did. He never tipped his cap in Boston because of how some of the fans, quote, felt about him. There is, in the instant gratification of sports, there is a feeling among some fans, and some of it may have to do with pregame and beverages up to the seventh inning, that may determine how people talk about somebody. And you act as if people are supposed to shrug it off. Now, I'm going to give you the name of a great entertainer from way back when, but it's his quote, okay? That's why I'm going to quote him. The entertainer who was brilliant on the piano and was a real showman named Liberace. I don't know if you remember him or not. But Liberace was, especially in Las Vegas, flamboyant, crazy outfits, the whole deal, could really right? And they asked him about the critics, and he said, I laugh at them all the way to the bank. Not everybody can do that. We're all different. Okay? We're all different. Because some people are more sensitive than others about it. I mean, the sensitivity of people is just different depending on who you are. And that's, for Mike Schmidt, I mean, some of that stuff, all these people are cheering for me now, but boy, when I was hitting 175, he hated my guts. And some people don't forget that stuff. I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. We're all different, but I don't blame people who feel that way. Like you look at somebody or a group of individuals and you say, like, when I needed support, where were you? You were telling me I was lousy and a waste of time. Oh, now you love me? Can you blame them?
No.
No, I don't blame them. Like, when you're down and out, that's when you need support. It's easy to support somebody when they are on top of the world. Yeah, he's the greatest. Oh, he's the best third baseman ever. Oh, yeah, Schmitty, we love him. 500 home runs. His 500th in Pittsburgh was unbelievable. Blah, 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 blah. Right? And then guess what? Right? They're sitting there to go, oh, you love me now, do you? I mean, that's... some people can shrug that off, and they're like, yeah, whatever, who cares? Other people remember it. It fuels them maybe in some ways, but, I mean, they remember it. I don't blame them for not forgetting it. When you're down and out, that's when you need support. And there's a segment, and again, it's not a big segment, Todd. Most fans, the vast majority of fans are great. They're supportive, right, and the whole deal. Okay? But there's that small segment out there that it's instant gratification and they're cruel. Now, they pay the money to see you play, and they get upset, by the way, at your performance. But, again, the bottom line is, right, when you're down and out, either as a player or most especially in life, that's when you need the support. And there's a segment out there, and it's a small segment that just flat out doesn't get it.
Speaking along those lines, did you see some of the stuff that they came out about Ryan Day yesterday?
No, I did not.
That they needed around-the-clock police protection between the Michigan and the tennis until they won the Tennessee game?
I'm not surprised.
The kid couldn't go to school?
Not surprised. Remember I talked about, maybe about that time, I think I did talk about this. Why is it that so many coaches and others in prominent positions send their children to private schools? Why do they have to do that? They have to do it because there is a cruelty among some. Doesn't mean there's not cruelty in a private school, but there's a cruelty among some because there's just more people there, more kids there. That it's for a kid that has to deal with it. And believe me, the family feels losses deeply. I mean, I was talking to Mike and Jody Rhodes last night for a while. And we're talking about when they had the streak. Wasn't going well. Right? It's not easy. I went back to my room after the Big Ten championship game, and it turned out the only other person in the hallway as I was going into my room was Addie Franklin. And believe me, his daughters Right. Fumi's great. His daughters are phenomenal. I mean, I've watched them grow up, which has been, for me personally, kind of cool. And they didn't win the game, but I knew they were going to make the playoff the next day. I knew that. Right? But she was in tears walking down the hallway. Oh. Okay? That's her dad. You know, it's your team, but that's her dad. Well, they feel the wins and the losses more so than all of us. You know, and I gave her a hug and I said, hey, don't worry. I said, we got more football to play. I said, this was a tough night. I said, but we got more football to play. And yes, I did use the term we, okay? I know I've always talked about how I don't use the term, but in private I can. And because I was trying to make her just feel better at the moment. But that's like that part's lost on people. And again, it's that small segment, Todd, I'm talking about. Small segment that takes all of this so personally. And as I've said before, a major issue moving forward, and it's already, to me, rearing its head, is those who have taken the extra step and have decided, it's your money, you can do whatever you want. Okay, you're not going to hear me criticize whether you want to gamble on something or not. That's up to you. But it does create greater emotions. Ecstasy, joy, because you won. Or absolute disgust and bitterness because it cost you money. You know what I think I'm going to tell Matt? I'm going to tell Matt that C.C. Sabathia got into the Hall of Fame and decided to wear a Cleveland hat.
How about Brewers?
I think that'll go over on Monday when I bring that up, or Tuesday. What do you think?
Pretty, not great. How about the Brewers?
Or the Brewers? I think it'll trigger them. You can't do that, Steve Jones. Can hear him now. Just to have fun. Just to have fun. Because we all know he's going to wear the Yankee hat on this plaque, but just to have a little fun. Sports is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be an escape. I know we treat everything so seriously all the time, and I got that. Believe me. I mean, you should see all the hours I put in preparing just to do a broadcast. I mean, like hours nobody sees, you doing any of that stuff. It's, hopefully the result of it is a positive for people who listen to us. So, like, for me, it's serious business. But sports is supposed to be fun, entertaining. It's supposed to be a great escape. All right? And, and bragging rights. I mean, like, I always kid Matt all the time about MVP stuff. But it's like, Philly fans took a lot of pride in Joel Embiid being the MVP. They would take great pride in Saquon Barkley if he won it. That I understand, because you're rooting for your team. Right? But, yeah. But there is a reality to it. It's entertainment. The intensity of it doesn't feel entertaining sometimes. Feels pretty intense. All right. Take a break. Come back with more in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK.